Hello and welcome back to Gapeys Garden. If you're getting tired of tomatoes, this is going to be the last one of the season. So we've been talking about our cherry tomatoes and micro dwarfs over the last couple of weeks, and now it's time to take a look at our larger tomatoes. So we've got a couple of beefsteaks and we've got some paste tomatoes to talk about. I'm doing a little bit of a different format than the last ones. I did the Brix testing ahead of time, so you don't have to watch me do that for each one of these. But I've got some notes that I'll be referencing as we talk about each one of these. And yes, I am wearing a jacket because it's starting to get kind of chilly here in Western Washington. And I think summer is pretty much over and we're starting to get into fall. So that means tomato season is almost at its end. So let's take a look and see what I thought about each one of these. Well, let's start with the bad news first. So this is our Prairie Fire tomato. It was kind of a cherry tomato. It's a larger kind of a pear tomato, but I didn't have it growing with my other cherry tomatoes. But as you can see, we are in the compost bin, and I just pulled out this tomato because it is the first tomato that's shown signs of blight. So you can see this dark stuff all over the stems here. That is late blight, and we get it every single year. And this year it seems a lot earlier than most years, and that's because of all the rain we've been getting. And we're starting to see foggy mornings, which also is a good indicator that blight is on the way. But I wasn't really too impressed with these tomatoes. They tend to drop quite a bit even when they weren't even ripe, and they also split quite a bit. They were pretty tasty, but the skin was also a little bit thick. As far as the Brix goes, it was 8.2, which is the highest Brix of the tomatoes I have growing in that area of the garden. Not quite the sweetest tomato in the entire garden, but it's definitely pretty sweet. Has pretty good flavor. I just don't think I'll be growing it again since it is prone to blight. So yeah, definitely won't be growing that again. All right, next let's take a look at our paste tomatoes. This is the prettiest one of them all. This is the Midnight Roma that I got from Row 7 Seeds, and the tomatoes are almost completely purple, and it was a little bit difficult to tell when they were ready to harvest. I'm not sure I have any right now, but some of these are just completely purple. You can see a little bit of green on this one here, so you know when they're ripe, when they start turning a orangish red color. It does seem to ripen extremely late compared to all the other varieties I'm growing, but I really liked this tomato, and it's fairly productive, though I do have a lot of blossom end rot issues on this one, probably the most of all the tomatoes that I grew this season. As for the Brix, this one had a 7.0 Brix, which is fairly high for a paste tomato. So it is tasty, has a little bit thick skin, but I would probably grow it again. Now the next two paste tomatoes that I grew right next to each other are both kind of classic type paste tomatoes. They are both red varieties. So this one here is called Salvaterra Select, and we've got a couple that are starting to ripen in here, but I've already harvested quite a few of these. I'm kind of comparing this to the other one I grew. But this one had a little bit more seeds in the inside. It was also a larger tomato though. The skin was a little bit thinner than the other one I grew. And this one had a Brix of 6.1, which is kind of average, maybe a little on the sweeter side, but definitely not as sweet as the Midnight Roma over there. But we still have quite a few green tomatoes on this one. The leaves are starting to get a little yellowy, so not probably going to be around too much longer, but I don't see any signs of blight on that one yet. But since it was growing pretty close to the other one, which was right here that I pulled out, I need to keep an eye out for that, and if I start seeing any sign of it, I'm going to get those out of there. Now this one next to it, this is the Inciardi Paste. I was actually looking forward to this one the most. I heard a lot of really good reviews on this tomato, but as you can see, the plant looks really terrible. Pretty much all the leaves on the plant have died. I don't think there's any blight on it. It must have gotten some other disease, but there's only 3 tomatoes left on it, and they are much smaller than the Salvaterra Select. The skin on this one also is a little bit thicker and chewier. So the flavor wasn't too bad. I think the flavor on both of those were pretty good, but this plant just looks terrible and didn't really perform as well as I had hoped. The Brix on this one was 5.9, so definitely not as sweet as the Salvaterra. And also this one, the meat inside was a little bit more firm, so kind of a little drier, not as moist, and also had less seeds. So I think both of those would make really good tomato sauce or salsas. But I don't know if I will grow this one again or not. There's a lot of other paste tomatoes I want to try, but it did not perform well for me this year at all. Now this one here is Henry's Bonnie's Best, and this is a round kind of classic tomato. It's not super juicy, so I think it would work pretty well as a sauce tomato as well. I don't have any ripe on here, but I have harvested quite a few of these, and I got these from the Rare Tomatoes seed swap last year from someone who says it's been grown and saved seeds from in her family for several generations. So the Bonnie's Best that you buy in the stores today probably won't be exactly the same as this one because these were saved, as I mentioned, over generations. So it was a really good tomato. It didn't get super tall. It's kind of, I think, might be the shortest tomato plant of those over in this area of the garden, but I did enjoy this tomato quite a bit. So Brix on this one was 5.6, so kind of average. Now this one here was, I'm pretty sure, my most productive of the larger tomatoes. This one is called SGT or Sergeant Pepper tomato, and this is another one that has quite a bit of purple antho coloring on the tomatoes. Not as hard to tell when it's ripe. There's a fair amount of green on the bottom of the tomatoes, so you can really tell when those are ripe by looking at the bottoms. So this one here you can see has a red bottom, so that one is ready to harvest. This one here also has some nice coloring. It does get a little bit of cracking here on the tops of the tomatoes though, but it's definitely a really good tomato and I would highly recommend it and would definitely grow again. The Brix on this one was a 5.1, so it wasn't super high, but I thought it had really good flavor and I didn't mind that it wasn't as sweet as some of the other tomatoes. Now these next two tomatoes are very similar. They're both beefsteaks and they're both yellow-orange in color. They have a different flavor profile than the red tomatoes, and I think I prefer the red tomatoes actually. But these have a more kind of a mild tomato taste, a little bit more fruity. Like I said, I think I prefer the red. But this first one here, this one is the Persimmon, and it was fairly productive, but it had quite a few different sized tomatoes on it. So let me bring over here. And we do have some ripe ones in here that are ready to harvest. You can see there's a tiny tomato down there and then some larger tomatoes up here. This one is probably the biggest one that I've seen on the plant so far. But there's a nice cluster of good sized tomatoes there. But it's not a bad tomato, but I think I do prefer the red ones. And the Brix on the Persimmon was a 6.9, and it had a bit thicker skin than this next one that I'm going to show you. This other one here is the Golden Queen, and this one is more of a yellow color. I think we only have one tomato on here that's ripe to show you. There is a little bit of cracking on the top, but not too bad. But we've got a fair amount of tomatoes on here, and also this one had a few different sized tomatoes on it as well. We did see a little bit of, I don't know if it's blossom end rot or cat facing, whatever you want to call that, on the bottoms. This one has it a little bit more, but I didn't see that issue with the Persimmon, and not all of them have it. This one looks pretty good, but I thought this was really a comparable tomato, and both of these beefsteaks, the foliage still looks really great, nice and green, and I don't see really any sign of disease on these plants, and they're still growing like crazy. This one here is growing off to the side. Probably should trim that back. But they both did really well. And then the Golden Queen here, that one had a Brix of 5.9, so it was not as sweet as the Persimmon, but the skin was a little bit thinner, which I preferred. But I probably won't grow these two again, just because I think I prefer the red ones, but I wouldn't mind trying some other yellow or orange varieties in the future, but I might stick to just growing one of each. Now we're going to take a look at the 2 tomatoes we have growing here in the greenhouse. These take a little bit longer season, so that's why I have them here in the greenhouse. The first one is Fertunia, which is in the garden every year, and I tried growing this one outside of the greenhouse last year, and it didn't set a single tomato, so I think going forward I will always grow it in the greenhouse. But this gets some massive, massive tomatoes. I got 2 off of it that were well over 1 pound, and it looks like we've got some more here that are going to be over 1 pound as well. This one here looks gigantic, but these are some monster tomatoes. So I've been using these for sauce mostly, or salsa, but they are a fairly juicy tomato, and I did have to kind of cook them down for quite a bit to make them for sauce because they were so runny. A lot of them do not have very many seeds, which is really nice for making sauce, but this was a really super productive tomato, and I will keep growing it for sure. But the Brix on this one was a 5.2, so a little bit on the low end, but it was a really good flavored tomato, so I definitely like this one. Now the other one in the greenhouse, this one we kind of named ourselves. I got this from someone at work named Shibly, so I called it the Shibly Lebanese tomato because he got seeds that he saved from a tomato that he got when he was in Lebanon. And this is a tomato that he's been growing for several years and said some great things about it, and said it just gets really big tomatoes. But honestly, I have not picked a tomato yet that has been over 1 pound, and it has taken a really long time for them to ripen. But it looks like this one could be over 1 pound. I don't think any of these will get as big as the Fertunia. And I have to admit, this is probably the worst flavored tomato in the garden. It really had no taste. It was very bland, so I definitely am not planning to grow this one again. I had high hopes for this one, but the taste is just really not good at all. And the Brix kind of shows that. The Brix on this one was only a 4, which is the lowest that I had in the garden this year. But I will probably save these for sauce because they are pretty firm tomato, not a lot of seeds, and I think would probably go best in a sauce because I do not want to eat those fresh. They just don't taste good. Well, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this last update of the season of the tomatoes. Hopefully the blight stays away from the rest of these for a little while longer. I hope the tomato season is doing well in your neck of the woods. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.